Welcome back to Wrestling with Politics. My name is Joel Perez, and today we're going to be discussing Joe Rogan and his recent discussions with the Kamala Harris campaign, trying to get Kamala Harris to come on his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. And as I'm sure all of you have already seen, there was just a big episode of The Joe Rogan Experience with Donald Trump on the podcast, and it was refreshing to see a 3-hour long conversation. And it, as a lot of people have been saying, it should almost be a requirement for these presidential candidates to do these long form interviews, to do these 3-hour conversations, so that we could really see and get a feel for who these candidates are. And in the case of Donald Trump, you already know that Donald Trump has a lot to say. And by the end of this interview, by the end of these 3 hours, I'm sure there was more that Donald Trump wanted to say. And it makes sense because when you're doing the Joe Rogan Experience, you have an open platform on the largest podcast in the world. And this podcast alone generated 40 million people.
It's former President Donald Trump sitting down with Joe Rogan in a wide-ranging talk, sharing reflections about the campaign season and his time in the Oval Office.
But what I want to get to is, like, what was the experience once you got inside?
The biggest thing was just that first moment of being in this it was really a hallowed place to me. It was surreal. It was beyond, to me, that was the experience. It was a surreal experience. And then with time, that wears off. With time, it becomes, your place where you stay. And I was doing a lot of, I had two things that I really focused on: governing the country and survival. Because from the moment I won, before I got to office, all of a sudden, they came down. Nobody has ever been treated that way.
In just 24 hours, Rogan's newly posted episode with Trump already catching tens of millions of views. Meantime, The Rogan Show, wildly popular with young Americans and men.
We've highlighted you on the show many times when you did this Biden impression where he's walking around, he doesn't know what he's doing. It's funny. It's stand-up. It's funny stuff. You have, like, comedic instincts. Like when you said to Hillary, you'd be in jail. Like, that's great timing. Yeah. But it's like that kind of stuff was unheard of as a politician. Like, no one had done that. And I think...
it's funny. You need at least the attitude of a comedian when you're doing this business. This is a very dangerous business, first of all. It's a very tough business.
Trump also taking questions about lessons learned since first holding political office.
Did you have a moment in time where you realized, like, these are bad choices? Like, some of these people I shouldn't have had in there.
Oh, yeah. I will say that it always comes back to the same answer. The biggest mistake I made was I picked some people. I picked some great people, but you don't think about that. I picked some people that I shouldn't have picked. I picked a few people that I shouldn't have picked. And
neocons?
Yeah, neocons, or bad people, or disloyal people, or
people that were just
people
bad.
That were into the
people got bad advice.
Yeah.
Rogan says his podcast is also in talks with the Harris campaign to arrange an appearance, but the VP's schedule has not yet aligned.
And the main thing that we learned from the 3-hour long podcast between Joe Rogan and Donald Trump, and credit to Joe Rogan, he's a very good interviewer, and he asked Donald Trump a lot of questions that he's never been asked before, that a lot of interviewers either haven't had the time or haven't had the curiosity to ask. And that's the thing about Joe Rogan. He asked a lot of questions that the common man would want to know the answer to, and Donald Trump revealed something big here, and that's something that might get a lot more people to want to vote for him this time around, because he admitted that the first time he was in office, he didn't know much. He was a political novice, and that was his first time being president. And Donald Trump didn't have much experience in politics, and Donald Trump's rise was kind of unprecedented. He claimed political office faster than probably anybody has in history. And so Donald Trump himself would tell you that his first time around in office, he didn't have as much knowledge or political experience as he does now. And he would make the argument that now he does have that political experience and that things would be different in his second term in office. And he claimed the most powerful office in the land. And he admitted in this interview that a lot of warmongers like John Bolton were able to get into his campaign. And as he phrased it, and Joe Rogan did as well, neocons were able to get into his campaign the first time around and infiltrate on behalf of the agenda of the deep state. Now, whether or not things are going to be different this time around if Donald Trump gets into office, I'm not so trustful about that fact. And that's why I'm voting for Jill Stein. But whether or not Donald Trump's campaign is any different or his presidency is any different this time around, only time will be able to tell. So it's safe to say that regardless of your political leanings, the podcast between Joe Rogan and Donald Trump was a massive success, definitely for Donald Trump. It amassed over 40 million views. And Donald Trump got the opportunity to speak to millions of independent voters who could possibly decide this election. So the question remains, why wouldn't Kamala Harris want to do the same? What is she trying to hide here? Why wouldn't you want to sit down in front of Joe Rogan's massive audience of millions of viewers? Well, if you want the answer to that question, all you have to do is listen to Joe Rogan himself, and he spills the beans here about his negotiations with Kamala Harris.
She had an opportunity to come in. You could look at this and you say, oh, you're being a diva. But she had an opportunity to come here when she was in Texas, and I literally gave them an open invitation. I said, anytime. I said, if she's done at 10 o'clock, we'll come back here at 10 o'clock. I go, I'll do it at 9 in the morning. I'll do it at 10 p.m. I'll do it at midnight. If she's up. She wants to, drink a Red Bull, fucking party on.
Yeah, but I think this idea that you're being a diva is silly because you're offering her the opportunity to do exactly what the other candidate did, right?
Well, she actually reached out when she found out that he was coming on. So their camp reached out to me. So I said, great, I would love to talk to her. But it was very difficult to tie it down, and they wanted to travel. And see, the thing is, like, you can't, if I go somewhere, then there's going to be other people in the room. And they want to control a lot of things, I'm sure, according to the Brett Breyer interview on Fox. Like, people were waving them off. That's a distraction. People in the room, like, my whole goal with her and with him was just talk. Just have a conversation like a human being. You find out things about people. You get a sense of them, at least, a real sense. That was it. I don't give a fuck what we talk about. I really don't. I just want to talk to you. Who the fuck are you?
Do you think?
And that 1 minute clip of Joe Rogan right there reveals a lot, because it reveals the real reason that Kamala Harris doesn't want to come on the Joe Rogan Experience. It's because, and Joe Rogan said it himself, he wants to have a real conversation with Kamala Harris. And that's not something that Kamala Harris is able to do. She's just not able to have a real conversation with the American people. And if she was to go on the Joe Rogan podcast, she would instantly fall apart. So that's why she doesn't go on. And it's probably better for her that she doesn't go on, because we already know that wouldn't go so well. And it wouldn't go so well not because Joe Rogan is asking her these hard-hitting questions and he's really confronting her on the issues, which hopefully he would, but because he's asking her questions that a real human being would ask. And we all know that wouldn't go so well for Kamala Harris. It says a lot that Kamala Harris wasn't able to get the deal done and get on to the Joe Rogan Experience. But as I said, it's probably better off for her, because it would have been embarrassing. But there's some Democrats on Twitter and online trying to make it seem like Joe Rogan is a diva for declining Kamala Harris, when in reality it was Kamala Harris. I want to set the record straight here. It was Kamala Harris who lowballed Joe Rogan, and she declined the offer and his terms for the interview, the terms that literally every other guest of the Joe Rogan Experience has had to agree to. The rules are very simple. It's 3 hours. It's in Austin, Texas, and you just gotta show up and you gotta talk for 3 hours. But she's not able to do it. She's not interested in speaking to the American people. And quite frankly, it's typical of Kamala Harris. But who cares about Kamala Harris? If there's a candidate I want to see on the Joe Rogan Experience, it's Jill Stein of the Green Party. And if you guys want to see Jill Stein of the Green Party on the Joe Rogan Experience as well, for now, you guys can let me know in the comment section down below. And if you want to see more of Wrestling with Politics, you can make sure to check out this video talking about Barack Obama shaming voters into voting for Kamala Harris, and this video talking about my recent prediction for the 2024 presidential election. So make sure to keep supporting Wrestling with Politics. And for now, thank you for watching this video.